AM 560. The Answer. From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Shaun Thompson. And this is the Shaun Thompson Show.
This looks like a job for me, so everybody just follow me, because we need a little
Cloward Piven implosion of our principles is really in full swing. There's no question about it. It's hard to pick which is most successful, economically, or the idea of doing all things at once through the open border of Bidenomics and Biden's policies. I think it would be that one. My next guest is an expert in this field. And right now, streaming right now on Salem Now, there's a documentary that's put together by Veterans for Trump. It's called Border Invasion, The American Crisis. My next guest is an expert in this arena. He is a retired supervising special agent with U.S. Immigration and Custom, Homeland Security Investigations under the U.S. Department of Homeland Security while serving with ICE. He personally led criminal investigations into human trafficking, drug smuggling, and violent crimes. He is Victor Avila. Victor, how are you?
Great to be with you, Shaun. I'm doing good. Thank you.
No, Victor, it's about time that this be done. And I'm curious to know, in your years past, your experience, obviously there's always been this circumstance of problems, with maybe immigration per se, that it was too arduous to get involved, and that there were countries that were actually abusing their citizens, and there needed to be a way in which they could find relief. But what we're really dealing with now is that seems to be the virtue shield, the smokescreen of what is really the undercurrent of what we're experiencing. Cartel takeover of our nation. How do you see it?
I see it just as you just stated. We're living in an upside down and backwards world where the immigration system was even the legal one is broken, but none of it exists anymore. This administration has done a job of combining illegal and legal immigration as if it was one in the same, when it's not. And yes, we've always had problems. I worked the border all my life, and the big difference, Shaun, back then is that we had this thing called enforcement of our laws. We were fighting it. We were prosecuting people. We were arresting people. That is out the window right now. That doesn't exist, because it's not just, I know we concentrate a lot on our border agents and other agencies, but we always have to think about the Department of Justice here, who has a huge role in declining the prosecutions of these individuals. Even if the border agents want to do their job, which, believe me, they're not allowed to do it, and they arrest somebody, they still have to go through the U.S. Attorney's Office to get that prosecution going, just like I did when I was an investigator. And if they say no, then that's the end of that case. And most of these people are being allowed, not being prosecuted, and allowed into our country with almost no vetting whatsoever. And it's putting us in a very vulnerable situation. We've seen it. How many cases more do we need of U.S. citizens being attacked, killed, or raped by people that are completely illegally present in this country? And there's thousands of them. I continue to speak to a lot of these angel moms, angel families that have suffered this. And these are real people with real victims that I always tell the people on the left, say, what are you going to tell them when you tell me that illegals don't commit crimes in this country? I don't need one more rapist or one more burglar. We have plenty of that in our own country. Speaking of Chicago, I mean,
well, that's why
we have that already here.
That's why, Victor, that's the part I want to take. I could tell you from being a Chicagoan, now an ex-Chicagoan, however, I still am back periodically from time to time, that there is no tragedy devastating enough to make the policies of destruction stop. I could tell you that. Whether it's a 1-month-old, a 3-week-old baby that's shot in the head while getting fed by his mother, or it's a 90-year-old man who lived his life virtuously, was cutting the grass, and is murdered senselessly. There's nothing that will make the policies of destruction stop. But I think the problem is the way in which we focus on the fight. So you and I can reflect always about the way it was and the way it is. The way it was when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, is that there was not a qualified incentive to be an illegal in this country. So what you had were people who who the country was trying to get, people who were fleeing hopelessness and oppression, and they did have to come here and do what was used and politicized called living in the shadows. But ironically, the people who did that actually became very productive because they didn't qualify for Section 8 housing. They didn't qualify for food stamps. They didn't qualify for the phony virtue of the government looking out and providing for them. So they really only had one option, and that is to be productive, to not be a lawbreaker, because that would bring attention to you and get you deported. So that system, ironically, was bastardized, or it was used as an example of how not to be. And it was then that the government, I think, understood how it could profit from these problems, because now you have the circumstance where those are the virtuous Americans and they're entitled to all kinds of money and benefit, and it actually grows the government corrupt bureaucracy while complaining about the problem. So there's no incentive to fix it. I'm wondering, is that how it's kind of understood in the bureaucracies? Is that how now Homeland Security and ICE is viewing it? We need these people here. After all, it equals more money, more jobs, more nonsense.
They have definitely normalized this in the last 3.5 years, which is a very, very dangerous path as we move forward. And as you say that, one of the words that comes to my mind is assimilation. I wrote a book, and I wrote the word assimilation in there, and that's what's non-existent at this point. I also grew up in the 70s and 80s, and when people were coming, that's the biggest shift. People wanted to come to America, to the United States, and be Americans and
right.
be U.S. citizens and assimilate to the community and to their church and be productive members of society, not commit crimes, not be a public charge to the government. That is almost non-existent now. Now they know that they're going to be taken care of in all these different aspects: shelter, health care, and even the criminal justice system. They won't get prosecuted. They'll get arrested and released immediately. On top of that, even easier because they're illegal. They get to board an airplane without any identification, something you and I can't do.
Right.
They get away with so many things. And that factor of not wanting to be and adopt to our culture. Yes, we do have one here in the U.S. It's called the U.S. Constitution. It's called law and order. And that's non-existent. And that's why you see a lot of crime. You see a lot of problems. The taking over of the houses and the squatters.
Yes,
and
I have the clip.
Issues that's going on.
Well, and this leads me to my next part of the problem. These countries that these people often come from, good people, let's just focus on for a second. The reason that they have the angst to get out is because the government itself has been so infiltrated, so corrupted by nefarious players in the country, there's a feudalism to staying there. However, what I can't help but notice is that is exactly what's happening here. Because these countries like Venezuela, like El Salvador, like Mexico is the prime example, where El Chapo bragged that he had given the last president $100 million, and they really operate as more of a cartel asset, apparatchik, than they do a government. And I'm wondering, is that the second piece of the puzzle? Is that those governments understand there's more money in being corrupt cartel members and helping them infiltrate America, giving lip service to American government, and working to show the American politician how to become an asset of the cartel? Because that's the only explanation I can have here in Chicago, where the Sinaloa New Generation cartel are having a far better year than 99% of the Chicago businesses.
Yes, and I could give you a perfect example of who is part of this aiding and abetting of all this is the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations paid by our money through the State Department, through FEMA. And so they have extended that operation, this well-oiled machine. And for some reason, the government is never really good at doing anything, but they're really good at doing this for some reason. They're really highly sophisticated and well-organized to bring people into the country illegally, even when they walk up and turn themselves into Border Patrol. Let me tell you right now, all of that is illegally done with this notice to appear, these NTAs, these parole violators, they give them these parole permits. This is all done illegally, and these people are going to find out that they're going to have absolutely no status come November, and it's for many different reasons. People say it's for votes, might be so. Maybe people say it's to be counted in the census so they could get additional representation. I mean, I think there's over 15 million illegals just in the last 3 years alone. How many? We're talking about 20 representatives in Congress.
Which brings me to my other point of what exactly is happening. There's something that isn't spoken about anymore, but it used to be. And it was this theory that America was put together by ill-gotten gains, that Mexico and the indigenous people were cheated from America, and they have a certain entitlement to it. So this isn't really, as it all is being sold to the American people, a problem of logistics, and they're looking for amnesty, and they want to become a refugee economically. There may be a certain aspect of these so-called illegal aliens, as I like to call them, or what are they called now, migrants. There may be an aspect of these people who feel this sense of entitlement. And I'm going to play you something that I think you'll understand how I came to this conclusion. This is a Venezuelan influencer. And I want you to listen to what he says.
Mi gente, he pensado invadir una casa en United States. Ya que me enteré que existe una ley que dice que si una casa no está habitada, podemos expropiarla.
He wants to appropriate vacant homes in America. Mm-hmm. He's calling on his fellow Venezuelans to simply kick in the door because they'll be protected, ironically, by American laws of tenancy. So he's teaching them how to do this. And then you reflect back to the Biden plan of giving phones. When you look at Kamala Harris, one of her first action was to go to these third worlds, hand out money and phones. And it's within the phones that the influencer can now reach tens of millions of people and tell them and school them exactly how to present themselves to so-called border patrol, exactly how to give the line of bull dung, as it's called in my neighborhood, to the people so that they can somehow get all of the benefits of just being here without ever putting in the system. But in their twisted minds and their contortion of history, they're righting a wrong. After all, they were cheated in the first place. Isn't that the only explanation for a Venezuelan to pretend he can appropriate property in America?
And you know what solidifies that is that it actually happens. They actually go to the house and try to get one of these squatters, illegal aliens, and they arrest the rightful owner. So they're sending the wrong. The Biden administration continues to send the wrong message. But I want to touch a little bit about Mexico. You know, I work there at the U.S. Embassy, and Mexico, you know, is very high and mighty on their protection of their sovereignty, and we're not going to allow any other country to tell us what to do. You just saw AMLO, the president of Mexico, on 60 Minutes last week, demanding of the United States something that how dare he, right? Why? Where do they get off demanding of the U.S.? Well, you know why? Because they know that the U.S. is coming from a point of weakness.
It's a paper
and
tiger.
Just like you and I know it, they know it too, and the rest of the world knows it, and they're taking full advantage. And the cartels absolutely play a vital role, especially in Mexico, because they're running a parallel government there. Let me tell you, these guys are in total control with the movement of the people, the fentanyl, the meth. I was in Des Moines, Iowa last week, and they have a huge meth problem, illegal alien problem. I'll be in Peoria next month talking about all this. And so it's everywhere in our country now. It's in Colorado, it's in California, it's in Seattle, it's in North Carolina. You cannot pick a place and say, oh, we're not affected by this. Everyone's being affected, especially the smaller towns and smaller counties.
You know, I've come to the conclusion, and I did this after years of focusing on the problem. And when you look back to it all, Pablo Escobar, all the rest of it, I truly believe none of this could exist without the assistance of nefarious players in the American government. I understand you worked in there and you spent your career in there, and you were one of the good guys trying to fight against drug smugglers, human traffickers, and anti-violent criminals being allowed in this city. When you reflect back on the 80s, when you look at things like Mena, Arkansas, when you listen to the testimony of some whistleblowers back in the day who were disappeared, is there any question in your mind that this could never have happened without a blind eye in the very basic sense of the terms, if not assistance of the American government?
None whatsoever. We focus so much on the corruption of other countries. It's right here in the U.S., and I'm talking about, I tell you, in my career, unfortunately, I put two U.S. officials in a corrupt Border Patrol agent and a corrupt female CBP inspector in prison for that, at that level. But absolutely, it goes all the way up. And yes, the billions of dollars are flowing, Shaun, and everyone wants a cut of that, including corrupt officials within our system. And so it's naive to think otherwise. it's time to open our eyes and say, wait a minute, these people actually have a role to play here. And this is where we have to kind of clean it up. And I'm optimistic. You know, I almost lost my life in Mexico. I got shot 3 times, and my partner was killed next to me. And you see the world differently after that happens to you. And after so many years after going through that, I want to be optimistic, and I want to say we will have the opportunity to still save this country. Unfortunately, it's getting harder and harder every day because they're destroying it as we speak.
So, Victor, tell me when you're going to be in the Chicagoland area. I know a lot of listeners are dying to meet you.
I'll be there April 17th. I'm going to be speaking at the Illinois Drug Enforcement Officers Association, and I'm looking forward to sharing my story and giving you the latest update on the border, specifically on the ground, because it's changing over here, Shaun, almost on a weekly basis, whether it's Shelby Park in Eagle Pass, Texas, or El Paso, Texas, Arizona. It's shifting. It's moving, it's fluid, and I stay on top of it on a daily basis, and I want to bring the truth to the people so they can make the right decision, maybe at the voting booth, maybe getting involved in the community and making a difference.
You know, Victor, I didn't even ask you about the documentary. What was your input in the documentary?
Well, I'm part of the documentary. We do the same thing here. We take you on the ground. We show you the pictures. We give you a lot of information. If you go check out this documentary, Border Invasion, an American Crisis, you're going to get a good briefing. You're going to get a good overall sense of exactly what's happening, not just from me, what I tell you in the film, but we got other experts on there giving their information and their expertise, and you will come out of there at least getting a better understanding of what we're facing.
When we get closer to April 17th, will you come back on and remind everybody?
We'd love to. Absolutely.
I look forward to hopefully meeting you one day. He is Victor Avila. Thank you so much for educating the people on exactly the way things work. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Shaun.
Thank you. We'll be back with your calls and comments.